While most paranormal enthusiasts will have already heard the stories of U.S. soldiers encountering and on occasion doing battle with strange Bigfoot-like creatures nicknamed rock apes during that country's bloody multi-year campaign in Southeast Asia, other similar stories involving various military outfits confronting Bigfoot-like creatures are less known but equally as interesting, and they span the world. Not as uncommon as one might think, military encounters with large hairy hominid creatures have been an ongoing but very rarely spoken about affair. At least 20 military bases in the United States alone have been the setting of strange encounters with hairy ape-like creatures, and those are the ones being reported, usually by personnel many years after retirement, when they feel discussion of such matters won't hamper or tarnish their careers. One must ask themselves how many stories have yet to see the light of day. One of the lesser-known accounts, occurring in 1925, involved Red Army troops pursuing ousted members of the White Russian Army through the Pamir Mountains located in Central Asia. While searching the rugged terrain, the men began hearing tales of a strange, frightening man-beast who inhabited the upper crest of the Vanch Mountains. Coming upon a cave that they were sure was being used as a stronghold for White Army members, Commanding Officer Mikhail Stefanovich Topilsky, a major general in the Soviet Army, ordered his men to open fire into the cave's opening. To their utter horror, a wild, hairy creature charged out from the cave's mouth, screeching, and into a hail of bullets. The creature quickly succumbed to its wounds. The officer and his troops would wait for several tense minutes before attempting to approach the downed beast, which was sprawled out lifeless in the dirt. Topilsky thought at first it was an ape, but knew there were no apes in the Pamirs, and moreover, the body looked far more human than ape-like. We tried pulling the hair to see if it was just a hide used for disguise, but found that it was the creature's own natural hair, Topilsky said. The physician attached to the unit would later write, "He didn't look totally like a man, but it was not an ape either. It was a male, about 6'7", covered with dark brown hair, and the face was dark, distinctly ape-like." In their briefings, the troops insisted that when the beast ran from the mouth of the cave, it did so on 2 feet, fully upright, dazed, terrified, and fatally injured. Others said the creature appeared to be in an obvious confused state of pain as it fell. Unable to carry the body of the massive creature with them, they buried it under a stone-covered cairn near the mouth of the cave. Odette Chernin offered a variation of this story in her book The Yeti. In her version, Topilsky and his team found one of the surviving White Army guerrillas alive in a cave in the Paramount Mountains. The frightened man told them that while in the cave, he and his comrades were attacked by several ape-like creatures. They fought back. In her account, Topilsky ordered the rubble of the cave searched, and the body of one of the creatures was found. In both tellings of the story, Topilsky and the physician made extensive, detailed notes of the creature. Regardless of which version you want to believe, it does appear something very strange occurred in the Paramount Mountains. On October 10, 2003, a pair of SAS soldiers set out into Ormeau, a hinterland town in the Gold Coast in Queensland, Australia, to search for the legendary creature, which was being seen quite frequently in the area at the time. After setting up camp in a semi-dense area of the fort, the two men, both armed with rifles, flashbang grenades, and scopes, set about keeping an eye on the area in hopes of encountering the creature. As per their military training, they kept detailed notes of what occurred that evening. At around 10:30 that night, one of the men noticed a figure in the woods. He estimated that it was a 7-foot-tall male hominid. It had a sulfur smell that lingered in the area. For the next 2 hours, the fully enraged creature stalked the two terrified SAS officers through the woods, growling, screaming, and shaking the forest around them. The two men emptied several clips into the foliage. As well, all flashbang grenades in their arsenal were used in an attempt to keep the creature at bay. At no time did I or we believe what we saw was human, one of the men said. Speaking to an investigator, one of the men involved in the Ormeau SAS incident admitted that even though he and his friend had served in many war zones around the world, whatever this thing was and what happened that night truly frightened him. He believed that the only thing that kept the creature from getting to them was the flashbang grenades, which seemed to momentarily startle the creature. He believes that if he had been unarmed and encountered the creature, he would most likely not have survived. I certainly believe that people may have been taken or attacked by it, as it was certainly aggressive enough. Former police officer David Playas, author of the Missing 411 books, detailing thousands of true cases in which people seem to have vanished into thin air in the various forests and national parks in North America, has long surmised that Bigfoot might be behind at least some of the missing people reports he's come across. This report seems to somewhat confirm it as a possibility. I think it is possible that, had any people met this creature alone in its territory, they would be very lucky to get out unscathed, if at all. As I stated, it was probably one of the scariest few hours I've ever experienced, one of the SAS men said. An interesting note that when compiling case studies for their book involving encounters in the Ormo region, the Yowie, Paul Cropper and Tony Healy elected not to include the story, if only because they found the credibility of the witnesses whom they admit they've never spoken to dubious. The biggest problem being the type of weapons the men were using are illegal in Australia, and it's very unlikely they could have been involved in a full combat scenario as they described without authorities being notified. Another researcher who claimed to have investigated the area afterwards confirmed down trees and bullet holes in the places where the men claimed that they were. Another more believable story involving a special air service sniper and a possible encounter with a Bigfoot occurred in Liverpool Creek, Queensland. Tom Floyd, a former instructor at the Land Command Battle School at Tully and now a corporate trainer based in Townsville, related a story to John Anderson of the Townsville Bulletin about an incident in 1987 in which a sergeant was sent to a ridge where he had to maintain an observation post looking down into the upper regions of Liverpool Creek. It was a 3-day hike in the middle of nowhere, right up in the ranges deep in the jungle. He stayed there in the same position, looking down into the top section of the creek for 3 days. Set up as a course for Special Air Service soldiers, Tom hadn't told the sergeant that there would be no enemy movement because no other soldiers had been sent into the area. Nobody came or went. The sergeant was entirely on his own. Tom had assumed the patrol report would be completely without incident. He was wrong. When the SAS sergeant returned, he handed in his report and a sketch of something he had seen. A sniper, he presumed, while lying silent and still in his camouflaged hideaway on top of the ridge. The sketch was of a large, hairy creature, a yowie, the Australian word for Bigfoot. He told Tom when he returned that he only seen one person the entire time he was on the ridge. He initially assumed that it was another sniper in a yowie suit. In the Australian military, special suits worn by snipers to break up their silhouette to provide camouflage are called yowie suits. It was then that Tom told the sergeant that there was no one else there. He was alone in that ridge for 3 days. No one else had been given the okay to enter. There were no snipers, no soldiers, no trainees anywhere near that ridge or along Liverpool Creek. The sniper was adamant that he did see someone or something, and it looked exactly like the thing in the sketch. 1 year after this incident, American Special Forces operatives on a training exercise in the densely wooded, snow-covered area of Alaska would encounter something that they were told doesn't or can't exist, something that truly terrified them. BFRO investigator Dr. Wolf H. Fahrenbach looked into the case and spoke to the team commander and believed it to be legit. According to the TC, a captain, the incident occurred in March 1988 in the North Slope borough of Alaska. Flown by helicopter out of Wainwright Air Force Base, 11 SFOs were dropped off in the Alaskan wilderness for a strategic reconnaissance training exercise lasting several days. Moving through deep snow, they eventually approached a wooded area too thick for their skis. About 200 meters into the bush, they came across a set of tracks that immediately drew their attention. The tracks were of a two-legged creature walking through the woods on a course perpendicular to their own. Human tracks of any kind were extremely rare in that part of Alaska, but these were particularly unique due to the length of the stride and the fact that there was no crushed snow on either the entry or the exit side of the holes. They attempted to duplicate what they saw but were unable. The snow was too deep, past their knees, and they always left drag marks every time. As well, they simply could not understand how whoever made these tracks could have been capable of such huge strides. We all studied the tracks and tried to come up with a reasonable explanation for what we were looking at. Only one explanation seemed to fit everything we saw, but it was not a reasonable explanation, the captain said. They eventually agreed that whatever made the tracks was 9 feet tall, weighing approximately 500 to 600 pounds. At this point, the decision was made to put the training mission aside for a while to follow the tracks through the woods. After following them for about an hour, something happened that would chill the men to their very core. From somewhere ahead of us, and quite a distance from what we could tell, we heard the most horrific sound any of us ever heard. Every other sound in the woods went instantly silent, and we could almost hear our hearts beating. It was at this point the team sergeant determined it was not a good idea to keep going. We really do not want to know what's at the end of those tracks, he told the captain. Noting their obvious fright and that they were not carrying live ammo and would be no match for whatever it was they might encounter, he agreed. The team resumed their original exercise, agreeing not to talk about it. Tracks in the snow are much easier to deny and ignore than actually seeing what made them. Whatever was making the tracks was moving through the woods exactly as one of us would have if we were conducting an escape and evasion. Whatever it was knew the land, as it maneuvered to bypass clearings well before they came into view. It was making a concentrated effort to remain unseen, the captain said. I still think that sound we heard was intended to warn us to back off and not follow. I have thought back on that incident hundreds of times and wondered how it would have turned out if we had proceeded to follow the tracks. In Rick Barry's book, Bigfoot on the East Coast, He reported on a case in which, it seems, the U.S. military either killed or captured a Bigfoot. June 1976 at around 9 in the evening, numerous phone calls from frightened and concerned citizens in the Old West Baltimore area of the city began to flow into the police. The majority of the calls, many from confused senior citizens with TVs blaring in the background, involved a large, hairy ape-man walking down Popular Grove Street. Many described that it stood over 10 feet tall. It was as wide as 3 refrigerators. A common factor running through all the calls was what the thing that they were seeing was definitely not human and stank of rotten fish guts and dog excrement. Sensing a growing panic, 2 police cars were dispatched to the scene. A large crowd of residents blocking the traffic greeted the officers. The police set about doing a search of the area, if only to put the crowd at ease. A canine unit was brought in, although the dog, for whatever reason, refused to track whatever had made that pungent scent. The following day, more reports flooded in. Many frightened residents began to sense that the creature they were seeing was most likely a Bigfoot-type creature. In between advising residents on how to stay safe in their homes, more dogs were dispatched to search for the creature. In an interesting turn of events, the dogs managed to track it to an interstate tunnel where a police officer observed the creature run under the interstate. A few weeks later, the creature reemerged, and this time the U.S. Army personnel were called in to deal with it. It was at this point events grew murky. Reports indicated that soldiers either captured or killed the Bigfoot. Media silence followed, and many in the area, including Barry himself, began to suspect a government cover-up was underway. In the next episode, I will follow this trail further and look into the extent to which government or other forces, including and possibly the Men in Black, are involved in covering up the Bigfoot phenomenon.